31 times the book of Job refers to God as the Almighty One. The book of Job is a record of a man who experienced great blessing from God, followed by great loss and affliction. The book of Job deals with the age-old question of why do good people suffer? When we do bad, we don't like it, but at least we understand that there's a cause-relationship effect that we do bad and bad things happen to us. Now, we expect that to some extent, and we realize that bad produces bad. But when we do what is right, and when we do what is good, and when we do what we should do, and then bad things happen to us, it just doesn't seem right, does it? There's this great struggle in our soul, and we kind of feel like we got the short end of the stick. We got a raw deal. I did what was right, and look what happened. If we've done bad and we get bad things happen, it's like, well, I shouldn't have done that, and I made my bed, now I got to sleep in it kind of thing. But when we've done what's right and then bad things happen, it's like, doesn't set well with us. Really, that's exactly what the book of Job is about, and it answers questions, some of the questions associated with that situation where you do what is right and then the bad things happen. And of course, Job has 42 chapters, and we don't have time to read them all today. And hopefully at some point in time you've read the book of Job, and maybe you've read the book of Job and it's like, oh, this is kind of tedious and this is kind of repetitive, and I'm not even sure I understand what's going on here. Well, today we want to try to help clarify some of what the book of Job is about. And really, the book of Job is a single message, and it answers that question, why do good people suffer? We want to kind of fly high over Job and look down over the mountain peaks. And as you read the book of Job, there are several major sections. Chapter 1 describes Job at the beginning. He was righteous and rich. That's how Job was. He was righteous and he was rich. And then Satan comes and God says, have you considered my servant Job? And Satan says, yeah, he only serves you because of all the good things you do for him. And so God gives Job over into Satan's hands. And first, in two stages. First, he says, you can touch anything, don't touch him. And so Satan destroyed all of the things that Job had, even his children. And then in chapter 2 is the second phase in which Satan afflicts Job's body. Only God says, don't touch his life. And so he's afflicted with these sore boils all over his body, and he's miserable. And then the majority of the book of Job is about three friends that Job has and their dialogue. And these three friends come to Job, and Job is this great man. He's the greatest man, and his friends come in order to comfort him. And they spend a whole week without saying a word. But then after that time, they begin this dialogue. And the majority of the book of Job is this dialogue between the friends and Job, back and forth, and the friends take turns. And the friends look at Job and says, listen, you've been bad. That's why these things have happened to you. You've sinned. And Job says, I haven't. And he insists he hasn't. The friends say, of course you did. Otherwise these things wouldn't have happened to you. And Job holds to his righteousness. And so there's this extended dialogue back and forth and this arguing about, you did it. That's why these things happen. And Job says, no, I haven't. And that's kind of a summary of those things. And in that dialogue, Job cries out to God and he says, God, why is this? This isn't right. I wish I could just talk to you and you would have to tell me why this has happened. And so that's part of that dialogue. And then there's a fourth friend who comes at the end of the book of Job, chapters 32 to 37. And this fourth friend says to Job, Job, you're just arrogant. You're proud. And what you say about God is not right. And these three friends, they're of no help at all. And he talks about how great God is, and he condemns Job as being proud and full of wind. And then at the end of the book of Job, when we get to chapter 38, God speaks. And there's 4 chapters, 38, 39, 40, and 41, in which God speaks directly to Job. And then the book of Job ends in chapter 42 with Job falling before God and saying, you're just so much greater than I ever realized. And I'm not going to say any more. I'm going to shut my mouth. And God restores Job's fortunes. And so it begins with him very rich, ends with him richer, and in between is this terrible time of struggle and affliction. Job is one of those books like the book of Ecclesiastes that has a single message. And we need to be really careful about taking verses out of context. If you ever read a devotional or something and it quotes from the book of Job or the book of Ecclesiastes, it's probably quoting it out of context. Because there's a single message. The book of Ecclesiastes, the message there is that life seems empty and vain and futile if God is not in the picture. And that's the message. That's it. I mean, that summarized it, but that's the message. And the book of Job is that suffering happens to good people, and that suffering isn't always the cause caused by their sin.